what can this story mean for us as Unitarian Universalists? Most UUs don't believe in a literal bodily resurrection, and most UUs aren't Christian. And I have to give you full disclosure here. I don't believe in a literal bodily resurrection. So why are we telling this story? But it's not about what I believe. First of all, we do have people who believe in a literal bodily resurrection. And if that's you, if you believe literally that Jesus' physical body rose and that we will rise again, I'm not here to squash your beliefs. But I don't think that's even the most important part of the story. And if you don't believe in it, what does it mean? Why are we telling you? Well, sometimes we get so caught up in wondering if a story is true that we can forget to look for the truths in the story. Do you know what I mean? Like I can remember when I was younger getting so caught up in the idea that you can't kill somebody by pouring poison in an ear that I couldn't enjoy the play Hamlet. And the play's not about that little act. So when we get so caught up in wondering if a story is true and we forget to look for all the truths, we can put a story aside, but maybe it's worth re-examining. I mean, this is an unbelievable story. I mean, it's really hard to believe. The women went to tell the men about it, and the men didn't really believe the women, and so they had to go see for themselves. Well, that's nothing new, right? That happens all the time. And if you know, you know. I'm not telling those of you who are women or who have been marginalized in other ways that people don't always believe us, right? Can I get an amen on that? Yeah. Mm-hmm. But then the two men go, and they don't really fully grasp either. Now there's Simon Peter, and there's the disciple whom Jesus loved. Now, scholars of John tell us this is probably John talking about himself, because he's very concerned with telling us that he's the one Jesus loved. That gets in the way for him a lot here. Maybe we'll come back to that. The disciple whom Jesus loved, asking for a friend. He's so caught up in telling us he's the disciple whom Jesus loved that he can't really grasp the fullness of what's going on here. Well, it's pretty wild. Can you imagine going to the tomb and looking in? It's like, what? I know we put him right here. He was dead. What's that all about? Now, have you ever been in a situation that you just couldn't fully grasp in the moment? Has that ever happened to you? I mean, we do that to ourselves. It's kind of a defense mechanism. It's like we almost go on autopilot, because if we stop to analyze things in the moment, we probably wouldn't be able to do the things we need to do to get through the situation. So let me take you back to just over a year ago. There was this virus that had just arrived in the United States. Maybe you know what I'm talking about. And we were being told to stay away from one another and close everything down. Did you have a hard time processing all of that information? What do you mean stay home? How are we going to, what do you mean? What? How are we going to do this? That whole "it can't happen here" thing that happened here. Perhaps there have been moments like that in your personal life too. A difficult diagnosis, a sudden family tragedy, or even a sudden turn of good fortune. It's really hard to process in the moment. How did you react? How did you react in that moment? Our whole world is caught in the midst of this sort of change right now. Right now. The burial wrappings have come off. Right now in Minneapolis, Derek Chauvin is on trial for murder, for the killing of George Floyd. The wrappings have come off. This wouldn't even have been conceivable 30, 40 years ago. We would have said, well, the police officer must have done what he felt was necessary. But people said, enough, no more. This can't happen. Now, I don't know what the results of this trial are going to be, but it's happening right now. There are events in the whole world. Do you know in Myanmar, the country that was formerly known as Burma, they're using Easter eggs. Easter eggs as a form of rebellion. They're writing messages on the eggs and leaving them to inspire the people in the revolution. In our own country, we've had states passing Georgia has passed the most restrictive voting laws in, well, who knows how long. Blatant attempts to make sure that voting rights are suppressed. And suddenly people are taking notice. How are we reacting? How are we reacting? Can you believe it? It's a bit like looking into a tomb and finding that Jesus is just gone. Now, I want to tell you that I asked our storytellers I asked them if anybody wanted to tell the story, and then I gave them the choice. I said, if you want to tell, you can pick which gospel. And Pete chose the Gospel of John this morning. And in the next part of this story in the Gospel of John, Jesus appears to Mary Magdalene. He appears to her. And she doesn't recognize him. I mean, she went to the tomb first. The women were there first. The women were there at the crucifixion. The women went to the tomb first. The men didn't believe them. Well, we talked about that. That's not new. And she doesn't recognize him. She sees him and she thinks he's the gardener, and she cannot wrap her brain around this. So what are you having trouble wrapping your brain around? We've been talking about big things, national events, world-shaking events, but we have these events in our own life, in our church life and in our own individual lives. We've just left our church building on Center Street. The building is empty. The church is here. It's here. Do you recognize us? Do you recognize us? Now the world is changing, and we have work to do in it. And there are so many possibilities inside of our Easter eggs. Now the disciples, the disciples had to let Jesus go in order to get Jesus back. They had to let go of the idea that he was dead and buried. John tells us that Simon Peter looked in and he's wondering, and then the one whom John looks in and he believed, but he didn't understand. They didn't understand yet. What didn't they understand? He believed Jesus wasn't there, but he hadn't wrapped his brain around it yet. He didn't understand. Well, he was still hanging on to telling us that he got there first and he's the one that Jesus loved. He needed to let go of some of that, maybe. What do you need to let go of? What do we all have to let go of? We know there's work we need to do. We know there are unbelievable things. Unbelievable things. I mean, it's pretty unbelievable that a legislature would say you can't bring water to people standing in line to vote, but it's even worse, I think, that they would say if the sitting legislature doesn't like the results of an election, they can just dismiss a county's board of elections and rewrite the results themselves. That's pretty unbelievable. What do we need to let go of in order to wrap our brains around what's happening? This last year has shown us who really keeps things going in our society. And guess what? It's not the Wall Street money managers. It's store clerks and sanitation workers. It's delivery drivers. And it's health aides. Many of the folks who are barely able to make ends meet themselves are the ones who have been keeping us going as a society. Maybe we need to let go of our devotion to capitalism in order to build a more just and equitable, beloved community. Well, it's ideas like that. It's that kind of talk that got Jesus crucified. Do we need to let go of the way we've always done it? We're trying an experiment now with universal health care. If you've gotten a COVID vaccine, that's universal health care on a small scale. And it doesn't just protect you, it protects the people around you. What do we need to let go of to make healthcare a human right and not something that's tied to employment? What do we need to let go of so that people can let go of being tied to jobs that are hurting them, but that they keep only so that they will have healthcare coverage that sometimes is inadequate anyway? Would we have a more fair and just society? What do we need to let go of in the world, in the nation, in our own church community, in our own personal lives? What do we need to let go of so that we can see the dawn of the new day? Put the burial clothes down, my friend. Put them down. Step out of the tomb. Let us arise and create the beloved community that we seek here in our congregation, in the Lehigh Valley, here in the United States, here on earth. We hold those possibilities. We can do this. Namaste.